I knew I wanted to work in games my whole life. I don't know what it was. I think even back to like middle school and high school, I would try to turn like projects into video games. And like the most horrible example of this is when Warcraft 3 came out, they had like the map editor. And I actually did a history presentation where I recreated some battle in Warcraft 3, but like with like camera angles and cutscenes and stuff like that. And looking back on it now, I realize I was a much bigger nerd than I thought. But yeah, I always knew I wanted to go into games. I started off as an engineer. I hopped around a bunch of mobile studios. And then I had a break where I was a technical game designer on RDR2 at Rockstar. And then after that, it was off to the races. I became a product manager at Zynga. I became a product manager at Google, WV Games, EA, Jackbox Games, Amazon Games. I make my own games in free time. I've consulted. I've written articles for now out of print game publications. So all over the place. I feel like the best thing I can tell people is it sounds all good, but I can assure you I've worked on like the top tier games, and then I worked on like the worst games of all time, games so bad that everyone on the team got laid off 2 weeks after launching. So I've been I've been through the gambit.
I mean, you have incredible breadth, which is incredible. But at the end of the day, getting into games is a journey.
Yeah.
Talk to me a bit more about that journey and those ups and downs, because as you mentioned, you started modding, just kind of building stuff within games, and like Warcraft 3, for instance. How did that
Yeah.
all kind of kickstart you?
Yeah. So I definitely started in StarCraft and then Warcraft 3 doing their map editors and their mods. And then I made a few things in high school using whatever C++ like simple direct overlay on OpenGL, so you could draw on the screen and stuff using like SNES sprites and stuff. But then it really kicked off. Let's see, I went through undergrad. I still made a few games, but nothing like major. And I went straight to grad school at Clemson. And then at Clemson, I took a weird internship over the summer. And this is circa 2009, 2010. Um, where we were making games. This is when Unity first came out. And so Unity wasn't really known. Unreal wasn't open source. I think it was still like Unreal 2.5 or 3 or 3.5. And you had to apply for a license. It wasn't like you could go download Unreal. And so I worked as an internship where we made video games for training for industrial equipment. So like people who repair machines that bottle. I remember one was like bottling medicine, so like a Johnson and Johnson subsidy, and we had someone would make the 3D models and then create the scene, and then I would place the camera and the interactions of like how to repair the it sounds insane when I
Yeah, yeah,
say it out
yeah.
loud, but how to repair these machines in Unity in like 2009 2010 in this company which we now call like serious games, so like games that aren't for entertainment. But this company like made a living making training simulations in Unity. And then that's when I got my first experience in Unity. It was like Unity 2.8 or something. And then from there, I graduated from Clemson with a master's of computer science. Now, I'm not the strongest programmer. I'm not the weakest, but like I'm like definitely in the middle of the field. I applied to like tons of jobs, and I got a good amount of interview in the game industry, but I was applying out of South Carolina. I lived in North Carolina, and at that time the game industry was very much like they would rather take a 5 out of 10 person who lives right next to the studio than bother like combing the country for junior level roles. And I didn't really have true game experience. As we all know, like that first marquee job is the hardest to get. And then once you're in the industry, you're kind of like, you got the check mark and it's much easier to hop around. So I couldn't break through. I remember failing the one job I really wanted, and I was doing a bunch of their programming interviews was Insomniac Games back in the day. And I remember failing that, or like not passing on one of their rounds and being devastated. So I had a choice of two jobs out of Clemson. One was to go work for IBM and live somewhere in Ohio, and it was going to pay me like a lot of money for that area of Ohio, and it was going to be like a nice living. And the other was to work for the University of Southern California and make basically like nothing for for LA, and um move out there, and we were going to make again the serious games thing, so like games for physical rehabilitation. And so I packed up my car, my mom helped me drive, and we drove I-40 from North Carolina to LA in 2.5 days. And I just drove out to California. I never even met anyone on the team. I never met anything. I just was like, I know I need to be in games. This is the only thing game adjacent. I'll take half the pay from something I don't even know about just to take a chance to get into games. I got there. We had this is when the Microsoft Connect first came out. And so we had hacked, someone else on my team had hacked Microsoft's Connects to get and then wrote DLLs to get them to work in Unity. And then my boss was a PhD in like whatever the K word is, kinesthesiology, whatever that word is. But they were a PhD in physical rehabilitation. And so we specialized a lot in stroke victims, getting motor skills on both sides of the body to be equal post-stroke. And so we built games that were like using the Microsoft Connect that were your exact rehabilitation, but you would be playing a game. So one was like picking fruit in a farm and stuff. And so the person would be like picking fruit, and then we would track your skeleton every frame, record it, and then send it back to your doctor. And your doctor could 3D rotate around the skeleton and check the angles of stuff and see like where you're weak and strong. And this is in like 2011. And at that time, so I was at the USC Institute for Creative Technology. I'm pretty sure Lucky Palmer, who went on to found Oculus and then sell it to
To
Facebook,
Meta.
which
Yeah, yeah.
became Meta, yeah, was there with me too. I remember, so we had a lot of early VR stuff. Like, again, in 2011, we had the stuff where like you insert your cell phone and it splits your cell phone to two views and isolates them. So it gives you like kind of like fake 3D. And we had a few people working on PTSD for war veterans. So they'd put on helmets, and then like your therapist could walk you through scenarios and make like different things happen while your soldier's walking. So there's a lot of cool stuff there. My heart was in like big budget games, so that wasn't the end of the line. This could go on forever, but like from there, I was there for almost 2 years, and then I hopped to a company in San Francisco in Soma, back when Soma in downtown San Francisco was like the startup alley. And we had a deal with Paramount, and we made a bunch of like again, we're talking about like 2012. So like people haven't figured this out yet. So we were making like app store games. I remember we made like a Jurassic Park game that got released and then pulled down right away. We were trying to make a South Park game, and so on and so on. But we learned how difficult it is, because like when you make a game for like a big IP, it's like the lawyers, the IP holder, the distributor, Paramount, like you have to pass everything, and you get notes like every day where they're like, this character held their arm up, but that character would never hold their arm up that way. So you got to redo this whole sequence, and you're just like, oh my gosh, who?
But it
Just
felt
let
like
us release this.
but you were actually making games. Like it sounded like you were doing like training stuff. You were getting involved into like virtual reality and doing stuff that again was for health and kinesthesiology. I can't even pronounce that word either.
I can't. Yeah, who knows?
But like, talk to me about. It always feels like it's a scrappy journey to get to that first game opportunity, which at the end of the day feels like, yeah, we're just trying to build mobile games, but you don't realize at the time like that is the little seed that then starts growing into.
That's the seed, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was a 6-person company that went under 6 months after I joined. And then I joined Crowdstar, who had a hit game for like a female mobile game called Top Girl. And then they had a line of like mermaid games. They had Covet Fashion. They had Design Home. I worked on the mermaid line, and then that's another one of the games where like I joined, we crunched, we released this like mermaid underwater adventure game that everyone knew wasn't good. And then it was the classic like That was everyone got laid off, 2 weeks off. I think we checked 40 people worked on that game, and we checked the revenue after like launch, and it was like $15,000. And we all looked at ourselves and we're like, okay, I think we know we're
It's over.
this. But like you said, you don't realize it because like you're in the struggle, right? And you're like, man, I want to work at Naughty Dog, but you don't realize like sometimes these small scrappy companies are the most fun because you get to wear the most hats. There's no red tape. No one's stabbing each other in the back to be the lead on Mermaid World stories, right? And so like if you have an idea, like I remember one time I was like, I think I can optimize our UI. And they're like, go for it. And I just rewrote all the UI in like 2 weeks. And it's like you learn so much working at these smaller companies than you do being siloed at a big company. But yeah, I got laid off there, went to a 3D printer company where I was working on game related stuff for 3D printers. It was a home 3D printer company. Lost that job, so on and so on. And then finally at like 27, so I've already gone through the gambit and I already have like, 5 or 6 jobs under my belt. Rockstar hired me to work on RDR2 as a technical game designer. But what I'd like to say to people is like, even during all this time, I had made so many games. So the whole reason I got attention coming out of Clemson, which is not at the time known for games at all, is I wrote my own fighting game engine while at Clemson, a 2D fighting game engine that was going to be like Marvel versus Capcom with NES characters. So like I stole all the sprites from like Mega Man and Mario and all the NES favorites, and then I turned it into like a hilarious Marvel versus Capcom fighting game. Um, that never really got released for obvious reasons, like widely, but I would submit it as like my project or proof of code, whatever, back in the day when you'd submit for stuff. And then even while at USC, I remember I made a Kendo 3D fighting game because I did Kendo many years ago in Unity for mobile phones. So this is like Samsung Galaxy S1, 2, or 3. And it was like, but then again, you're making stuff, you're making portfolios. So even though you're not in games, right, you have a portfolio of stuff where you have screenshots, you have videos, you have code samples that people can download, and you have a personal website. And then when you apply to Rockstar is not like, oh, are we going to hire the Mermaid World Stories UI programmer to come to our team? And like, obviously that doesn't look great. But then when you're like, no, I paid the bills. I mean, I've worked in games, but here's what I do in my own time. And you have like a list of all these projects, even if they're not like blockbuster indie releases on Steam. People can look at that and then they go, okay, like this person, your goal when you apply is to get them to look at your portfolio, and your portfolio's goal is to demonstrate whatever you're lacking because you worked on like Mermaid World stories or rehabilitation games. And then you're trying to convince, Rockstar Games that not only should you hire me for AAA game development, but you should hire me for a game design role, which I've never had on AAA game development. But then you have all these games and all these experiences that prove otherwise. So that's the long journey that I took to get that marquee role. And then once you have that marquee role, it's easier to like keep that going. Some people, I don't even want to say get lucky because we don't know what people did or didn't do. Like maybe they super hustled in school and they were able to land that role right away. But I'd say like the theme is if you want it and you keep trying for it, you're going to get into the industry and you're going to get the role you eventually want. And then the joke is you'll find out that that's not actually the role you want, which I think is what we're transition to like how I got into product management is once you work on all these games and in the industry, you might realize like the roles that sound really cool, like obviously when you're like 8 and someone gets paid to play video games all day and you're like, oh my God, I would totally do that. But like the life of a QA analyst or QA engineer is like not an easy life. And the same thing for like a game designer. It's like, you think, oh my God, you get to be a game designer on XYZ AAA game. But then you realize like these games are in development for 5 to 7 years and you're like making these designs and they're getting thrown out. You're like
Yeah.
crunching. and you could make entire like campaigns that get thrown out, and you're just like you're soul crushed. You're like, oh my god, I worked so many weekends, and then we decided that whatever I was working on isn't going to make the cut, or the game needs to pivot for like the third time. um so once I've had all these jobs, and as an engineer I worked as like everything from like writing the game engine to gameplay to servers and stuff, I found myself gravitating towards like more business decisions and business roles. So rather than like solving, like, I think as a game designer, your ultimate goal is invoking emotion. And I won't say manipulating players, but it's like taking players on an emotional journey. And that journey can be, I really want a cool, shiny sword, and I kill this monster and I get a cool, shiny sword. And it's amazing, right? Or that journey can be, I need to make characters like feel for this character and fall in love with them. And then when tragedy hits later, it sets up like a plot or like a story device
But Eric,
for this other thing and so on.
before we get into the product, because we're going to transition there
Oh, yeah,
soon,
sure.
I do want to go back into the journey for a sec. You talked, to me, it sounds like you got so much exposure going through all those different jobs to get to kind of the marquee RDR2 kind of rockstar job, right? But you mentioned wearing all these different hats. For someone listening who's thinking, I'm not going to have the traditional pathway. I might not necessarily go to school and become a game developer and then break into the industry that way. I may go in a bit more of a scrappy route, which is what I tend to see with a lot of other guests. People just kind of squeeze their way in. They find an
Yes.
opportunity. They keep getting one after the other. What were all those different hats that you wore that kind of gave you that perspective, that and experience, and potentially create projects that when you got to Rockstar, you gave a good interview, you gave a good portfolio?
Yeah. I think it goes back to figuring out where you want to be, and then figuring out how that, like, working backwards, what would Rockstar look at in someone like me to then want to interview me, and then what are they looking for in the role that I can beat out people and really show that like I'm the right candidate. Because I think it's very, I see a lot of people, and I'm the captain of like being frustrated. I've applied to a trillion jobs, and then I'm always like, why aren't they hiring me for, you know, CPO at Activision Blizzard? I don't know, like some jobs that I'm not even remotely qualified for. Um, but really like think about like honestly, like what is Rockstar looking for? And then who's all applying? And then how do I stand out? Like pretend you're the hiring manager, pretend you're the team that's has an opening and looking for someone. And so I think the two paths that I'll talk about is like you're gonna have to do stuff outside of work to get these jobs. You're not gonna be able to just work a 9 to 5 job. Maybe, but like you're not gonna, if you're not working at a AAA game company, you're not gonna be able to work a 9 to 5 job and then have a AAA game company hire you for an important role. Like it's just not gonna happen. It'd be like I want to direct the next big Marvel movie, and the Marvel company is going to be like, oh yeah, he's working at Amazon Japan Manga, we should just hire him as a director just for no reason. Like, you know, when you work through it that way, it doesn't make sense. Like, why would, so on your professional life, you can see I've had like so many random jobs that don't really seem like they add up to much, but you do learn a lot. And I would just follow what you find interesting, because although again your end goal might be AAA game designer or insert product manager at Tencent or some dream job at a dream company, right? You might find that that's not your dream job, but you should just go with whatever is the most interesting and whatever you're feeling passionate about, whatever gets you excited. And so a lot of these jobs, like like what I said when I was graduating Clemson, I had a job offer from IBM, and I can't even remember what it was, but it was like writing parts of some custom Linux kernel, and they would have paid me a lot more, and that job would have been like super safe. And there are times in your life where sometimes you need, like, you have a family to support, you have debt, you have student loans, like you need to take these jobs. But if you don't have to take it, like life's short, and like getting these experiences of working on, you know, mermaid world stories sounds like whatever, but then at the flip side is like I worked on games for physical rehabilitation for stroke victims. And then I worked at a scrappy 6-person startup where we just like pumped out mobile games in C++ for like Paramount IP properties. And then games for like, I would say like 11-year-old girls and like what would they like to see in mobile games. And then games and puzzles for home 3D printers. So how do you print out a puzzle for home 3D? And these seem like random roles, and to some degree they are. Like I needed a job, we all got laid off on some game company, and then I just took the job. But me retelling it now with the end already being accomplished, where I am in my career and stuff, it sounds so cool when we talk about it, but when you're in the thick of it, it's confusing and you're like, how did I end up here? I want to be at a AAA game company and now I'm at a home 3D printer company making puzzles that you print out on your home 3D printer. But the theme of that is keep going with whatever you find interesting, and because you find it interesting and you're making it work, it's going to lead to somewhere and it's going to be a part of your story. And then when you get there, also be open to everything. Like the 3D printing home 3D printing company, they didn't have a puzzle division or anything. I got there and I was making 3D printer software for kiosks so people could go up and this is like circa 2013. So people could go up and print out cell phone cases from this 3D printing kiosk. And then I messed around with stuff. So this is an example of what you can do at these jobs. So then I messed around with it in my own time, the 3D printers. And I was like, wait, there's all these like puzzles, like a bunch of bent nails. And then like you twist them the right way and then they like come apart, right? And they're like physical puzzles. And I was like, I wonder if we could print, like, what could we print that's a game that's at home that isn't like you home printing Dungeons and Dragons or Warhammer figurines, right? And so I thought about, that's what led me to those. And I would work over and over again. How could I print puzzles with a 3D printer that were already put together that then you could take apart after you print them? So you're printing like things for you to solve. And then that's when I really studied the angles of home 3D printers and what are the angles. And then I had to study, I forgot what these puzzles are called, but like the physical puzzles of like taking apart stuff. And then I had to figure out like which ones would actually work in a 3D printer and then spend like multiple hours a week, like trying to like invent this product that didn't exist. And the product line never took off. And these home 3D printers don't exist anymore that I worked on. But this is an example of like, I'm not going to say I got like lemons and turned them into lemonade, but I lost my job on CrowdStar working on Mermaid World stories. I couldn't get another game industry job. It's not like I was like, actually, Naughty Dog, I'm going to pass on you and I'm going to work on this home 3D. Like, I couldn't get another job. I had to pay my bills. I get to this home 3D printer company. I'm working on the kiosk stuff. But then it's like, okay, what else can I do here? And how can I turn this into something game related? Or how can I make like something interesting out of this job?
I
And
think
so
that's
that's like the
exactly it.
professional career. Yeah.
That's exactly it. Like when there's a good quote from Steve Jobs, which is you have to trust that the dots will connect looking backwards. And I think a
Hmm.
big skill when you're coming up in your career is being able to interpret problems, lessons, solutions that you've come up with, experiences into these stories that then connect to the next one. And you don't really notice it as you're moving forward, but when you get to that interview and then you look backwards, you think, oh, well, I did Mermaid and Mermaid Stories. I learned how to work with the QA team and what it meant to really deliver something on time, and also what it meant for a game to underperform. And working for the 3D printing software company, I learned how to look at puzzles and like try to figure out my own. There's a lesson that you can extract from everything, but again, the trick is you don't see it moving forward. You only look at it
Yes.
later on, looking backwards. And it's something I've experienced myself as well. And it's such a key thing because that's how you give a great interview. That's how someone hires you when you don't necessarily have Naughty Dog and Rockstar and all these big names in your CV, but they're looking for a story. They're looking for someone that can adapt and kind of really learn on the job. And you only get that through experience and putting yourself out there.
Yeah. And then on the other side of that, so that's like doing the best with what you're given. So whatever job you can get, like how do I make this the best job for me at this situation? And then if you don't have that resume, and we can get into this with product management because I think it's even harder than like
Yeah.
game engineering or design to break into when you don't have that marquee job or whatever people are looking for, you're gonna have to do stuff on your own. And so I can't stress this enough. And it sucks looking back on it, but like I didn't think it sucked at the time, but I used to give up every Sunday for like 8 to 10 hours and work on a game every Sunday. And then every night work on a game for like 1 hour. And these are games that never got released. Like I have some games that are released and you can play publicly, but none of these games I worked on were released, but they all taught me so much stuff of like the hard way of like how do I make a UI system for a fighting game and explain how to do moves and stuff like that from scratch. And you're going to have projects like this on top of like telling the story of like I worked on this and this and I learned these at this company, because again, back to the truth of it, you're competing against someone who has like an all-star resume. So how do you show that you're even better than that? Well, that person worked at these companies and that's it. You not only worked at these companies, but you also are making games. Like you live and breathe game development, and it really like shows that this is what you want to do. Um, and then, I would say it's more true now than ever. You might find yourself actually being able to, like a lot of your guests, support yourself or achieve your goals the scrappy way without these big companies. Cause I think that's like a theme in life and stuff is like, again, back to it, I thought I hit that dream job, game designer at Rockstar. And then I'm not a game designer at Rockstar anymore. So I think going through the scrappy route with the passion projects on the side and using those as your like portfolio for when you get the interview to really show like, this is why you want to hire me, is because these other people just work at companies, but I'm over here like living the game developer, whatever lifestyle. But like I live and breathe this, and this is what I want to do. This isn't a job. And so figuring out like what those projects are or just doing what you find interesting, that's like the key to like breaking through, or the key for me is like I had all these jobs and I made the best of them from what I could, and I learned what I could from all of them. And then on the side, I was also making these games at night and on the weekends, and had a website where you could go and see all my games, download the source code, see videos and screenshots. And I think that combination is what like finally helped me break through, again, going from getting laid off on Mermaid World Stories to being a game designer on RDR2.
And making those games, when you're working in a big company, all of a sudden, that game that you're working on, every single small component of it gets broken up into specialized teams or specialized people working on it. Someone's doing the combat UI, someone's doing the interface UI, someone's working on the engine, the other one's working on perhaps the interface itself and the sound. And when you're building your own game, and I've spoken about this with other people on the show, other guests that have come on, you own everything. And so you
Everything.
are experiencing it directly, and there's no other teacher quite like that, which I think for anyone listening, just jumping in and trying to build your own game, no matter what level, you get exposed to problems and situations, and you create an empathy for building this entire thing that it's unlike any other industry, because you are building something that has to be fun, but is also interconnected and just yeah, what was your experience, again, building these games from scratch? Did you resonate with that?
Oh, 1,000,000%. And I would say because product management's such an all-encompassing, like obviously it's business focused, but like unlike a specialized engineer, like you said, like a networking engineer, what do they need to know about like IK bones on an animation rig, right? They don't need to know any of this stuff really. And but as a product manager, you'll look at like a competitor's animations, and then you'll look at your animations in your game, and you're like, man, if we just like put these trailers back to back, our game doesn't look as good. But if you made one of these games, even like trying to make 3D animations in Blender where you model, rig, and animate, and then put into Unity, and then like you never release this game, but you're working on this game, you now have at least some concept of how to talk to like the art director, the animation director, or someone for a specific animation. And you're like, I think there needs to be more anticipatory, whatever, like anticipation movement before this to really sell it that this movement is like big and impactful and really struggling for the player. Like you gain some amount of like knowledge to bridge that versus like someone who just graduated from an MBA and took this product manager job at the game company and is like, I don't know, our product needs to be better. But then you made these games and you wore all these hats and now you can go in and you can be like, I mean, you're not going to like really outsell like an animation specialist on animation, but you can at least talk to them. And you're like, I think this is wrong, or this is what I'm seeing. This is what our competitors have. And you can have like a better conversation. So I think wearing all the hats only helps everything in the future. And again, you don't know where your career is going, and you might need to be in a role where you have to like direct everyone at once. You might need to be in a role where you're at a 5-person company and suddenly you're taking on some of these tasks. And so I think all of this stuff just helps, constantly growing. I will tell you a quick aside. I have the best story of like someone being over specialized. And I'm sorry if this person is listening, but so there was a guy at Rockstar. And so for RDR1, he was like the horse animation specialist. And so for people who don't know, Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2, they take place in like the dying Wild West days, right? So everything's by horse or train and maybe like horse and buggy. And so he was like the horse animation specialist. He did like the animations for like the bones and how the muscles move and everything for RDR1. Then comes GTA 5, and GTA 5 has horses and other horse-like animals. So lo and behold, he becomes like the horse expert and the 4-legged hooved animal expert for GTA 5. Again, modeling, rigging, animating. How do the bones look? How do the muscles look? How does like the skin stretch when they're running? Bam! Next, RDR2 kicks off development. Guess who's doing the horse specialty
Same
for
guy.
RDR2? And so there's like people, and this is not an insult, but there's people who like their career became I do horses at Rockstar. And this person's pretty like, I don't think they're unhappy with their job. So this is not like throwing shade at people, but this is to give people like the difference between working at a 5-person company where like you could do almost whatever you want. Like you could do your regular job and there's no amount of extra work you can't do that like a 5-person company wouldn't be like, oh, you want to refill the snacks at the snack bar? Go for it. Like if you want to like download some like Audacity or DAW and like low pass filter our music so it blends better, go for it. Like let's try it. Let's see if it's better. And then on the flip side, you can just work on horse animations and horse modeling for like well over a decade. And so that's like the wildness of the game industry career and the specialization that could happen at AAA.
And how important it is to get those early 5 people, 10 people roles. Because for me,
Yeah.
I was a junior product manager at EA, and then I got the opportunity to work in a small mobile games company at Playwind in London. And I got to be product manager, I got to be producer, I got to be game designer, I got to work all across those roles. And like I really credit that experience and Jack who hired me and everyone there. It was an incredible experience, and it gave me so much kind of understanding of how to build an actual game that I wouldn't have gotten had I been in a hyper
Hmm.
specific role in a company doing my little bit, passing the baton on. I just don't think but again, that's not the typical route. So um if we move towards product, then if I can pivot a bit, we've talked about game design, we've talked about kind of engineering. For someone listening that doesn't know, keeps hearing product management, doesn't really know what it is, what does product management mean, and within games?
Yeah. So I try to say, as a product manager, your job is to get business outcomes for the game. Okay. And this could wildly depend on your level of product manager, how big the company is, and a lot of different other factors, right? But ultimately, revenue is generally the goal of video games. Whether you want to argue for it or not, there's serious games where they're not trying to earn money and gross income. And then there's other games like adjacent marketing things where maybe eyeballs on the product are the most important thing, or active users. But for the most part, games need to make some amount of money to get a return on investment. And so as a product manager, the ultimate goal is revenue. But then at different companies, you product managers, just like game designers, producers, and a lot of other roles, your responsibility and scope of the job is wildly different at one company than another. But your job is to help drive that business outcome, even if you don't directly own revenue. And how this looks at a large scale is there's a few like skill sets, and that's why I put together this playbook, because it's such a difficult topic for to break down for people, especially if they've never worked in games or never worked with a product manager. But if your goal is to make, we're working on a game, you and I, we have a team of 10. The game's going to release in 2 years, and we have to make $10 million at least, or we all lose our job. Very common scenario in the video game industry. So the product manager's goal at different stages of development is to give everything as much like chance as possible to hit that $10 million. And the game industry is so wild. It's very similar to music and movies, where like so many things can happen between now and release. The whole market could flood with competitors right when you're trying to release the game. The zeitgeist of whatever genre or art direction or style of game you're making could completely shift. Like I call it the Nirvana moment. Like there's a bunch of hair metal bands, and then Smells Like Teen Spirit came out, and then all of a sudden everything looks super old and dated compared to like the grunge movement. Um, a lot of things can happen. So your job at every stage is to make business decisions, or help the people who make the business decision make the best decisions possible. And so the core set of a product manager skill is really to use data to make business decisions, and again, like be responsible or maximize the chances of having business outcomes and success. So when I broke it down, when I like describe this job to people, or I get new, like new MBA grads who have never worked in games and never been product managers before, there's like a few key skill sets. There's two, and then a third one for live ops. Metrics, and metrics translate, like not always like qualitative, but like metrics translate performance into a measurable, comparable instance of both a time and a measurement. And so like DAU is probably the most common metric, daily active users. How many unique users use some product within like a 24-hour period? And so with DAU, we can now compare games across a single metric and see how all the DAUs stack up. And so why this is so important, and this is like, as someone who like lived through this transition in video games, before, it sounds really dumb, but like before, people would just describe games as like how many copies they sold or something like that. And that was good when games, the whole goal was to sell like a premium box product. And then once it was sold, you didn't really care if people even opened the game and played it that much. You probably cared a little bit as a publisher, and you wanted to make sequels or other stuff like that. But as long as it sold a copy, it didn't matter. But then as games transitioned in like the mid 2010s, so mobile came first to this like games as a service, social games on social media networks like early Zynga on Facebook. But then it became more important to grow your game and treat it like a SaaS business than it was to sell a premium box product. And then that's when these metrics really started becoming important. And so metrics give you like a measurement and a comparable point, and a repeatable measurement to compare some part of the business performance within a time period to other parts. And those other parts are other games or parts before that. So how did this week's DAU do against last week's DAU versus the year over year DAU, and so on. And so that gives you like a measurement of like, how are the decisions we're making panning out? What decisions should we make in the future? What are the opportunities and what are the risks? And then the other like main skill set that isn't live ops related is modeling. And so then using those metrics to model out and make as an informed decision as possible. So it's like anything else, like the stock market, they're using models to adjust risk on both sides of a trade. And like maybe the bank's job is to like even out that risk on both sides. So selling you an option and then writing an option on the other side to someone else. And then it's like even risk, but they use models for that. So we also need to make models in the game industry to make like well-informed decisions. And so there's two types of models, a top down and bottoms up. The bottoms up model is like you're answering like, how much money are we going to make? And the top down model would be like, if we need to make this amount of money, what does that look like in the game? And so the difference could be the bottom up model. You model what your players look like now. How many players do you have? How often they churn or get acquired? How often they convert, and what at price point do they convert at? And you can build up a model and say, in a month, we're going to earn $50. And then the flip side is how do we earn $200? And then you go down the stack and you're like, oh, we need to like quadruple conversions for players or something like that. So metrics and modeling. The third skill is experimentation, which is for when the game's live. But with those skills, you can then guide games through pre-production, production, launch, and live ops, and you can help make like the best decisions possible across the board, really. And so people think product managers, and this is where like the job has slotted to a lot, is you're running the store, you're setting price points, you're setting how often loot drops, you're measuring currency gains and sinks. But a product manager can help like game design teams figure out experience curves. It can help art teams figure out like color palettes. And so it's not quite as, although the job, if you were to get a product manager job today, it'd be very similar to what it was when Zynga kind of like defined the job in the 2010s. The job really is making business decisions and maximizing business outcomes. So you can use that same skill set to figure out how much to charge a bundle of premium currencies and power-ups in a mobile game. You can use that same skill set to figure out like how often health potions should drop in Baldur's Gate 3 or something, like anything really. And so just figuring out what is like the business outcome you want, and then working at what stage of development to helping everyone make those decisions. That's pretty much what product management is. But if the game does have revenue, like that's your ultimate goal. And then how does that revenue goal break down? So I just said a lot. Let's clean it up a bit.
No, I'm thinking we talked about this offline, and I've thought about this myself quite often. When I first got into games, every game studio has a different interpretation of what product management is.
100%.
And a lot of times you get the clash between producers who are technically, if we had to break it down, I see the what and the why. What are we doing and why are we doing it? I see that as product management territory to a certain extent, although there are overlaps of production. I tend to see production as the when, planning how the work goes through, who does it, etc. And then engineering is the how. But ultimately, product management has to kind of define what it is that we're trying to do, and then why. Are we trying to hit some kind of business outcome? Is there some kind of efficiency? Is this something coming from higher ups? And what I found interesting looking into why is there such a kind of overlap between production and product management is that, like you mentioned, the gaming industry was very much the Hollywood model. Prior to the internet, you just cared about selling a CD. So you shipped your box game, people would buy it. That's that. Like I sold a game, it's like someone going to the movies. I buy a ticket and that's great. That's my revenue. And then gradually as games became kind of more online, capable of updates, mobile gaming, free-to-play kind of versions of gaming, suddenly you got this Silicon Valley kind of product management coming in, clashing with the Hollywood style of just making games. And now you got this kind of weird kind of in between where I think this is what we spoke about when we first spoke prior to this episode. that's where product is a bit muddy. Like every game studio, again, will have a different interpretation based on what producers do. And are producers simply defining the when, or are they also defining the what? And where does these decisions happen? Are they coming from design? So it's fascinating because product is such an important role, but it is such a jack of all trades. And what I like that you're saying is that it does come back down to the business outcomes. But the way you get to that good business outcome, you can work with a design team and come up with an ingenious design based on player data and player kind of qualitative research. And that's as valuable as someone going in and saying, let's raise the price of this tour.
100%. Yeah. I'll even further clarify this. So like you'll find at every studio, like you said, wildly different what product is and what do they own. Very quickly, I like to tell people if you want to figure out what you own, figure out what you're going to get yelled at for, and then you own that and just assume. So, like, if revenue goes down and product is the first role that gets yelled at, product owns revenue. If, the servers go down and product gets yelled at for some maybe technical product managers, then you own server, like quality. But yeah, so at some studios like Zynga, I don't know how it is today, but when I work there, like product managers and Google in a lot of ways can not, I'm not going to say do whatever you want, but like you can actually go in and design game systems if you wanted to. Like you could write a game system design and to some degree get it implemented in the game if you like worked hard enough. And you could take over, like you could impact art direction. You can impact a lot of the game. And then I've worked at other studios where product managers are borderline a support role because you can't actually go and like tell people what to do. Not that I'm saying like you need to be able to tell people what to do, but like product didn't own anything and there wasn't like a clear defined like the product manager makes these decisions, whereas at like a Zynga type company the product manager owned revenue and metrics. And so if the product manager said DAU's falling because the text on the screen is red and not blue, and then had some data, maybe they get that text changed without like people blinking too much, right? And so if you find yourself in the second role, you might think like, oh, this is like a neutered product management role. I don't own anything. I can't yell at people. Not true at all. Let me teach you how to still do your job as a product manager there. So let's say you're at one of these roles where product manager doesn't own anything, and then you're building a new game mode. The first thing you do, go do competitive analysis. Go say like, oh, what does this game mode look like in other games? And try to find as much information as possible to figure out like their LTV of players and all the stuff to work with design to make the best decisions on the first design. And then when design's done designing the game mode, go take your players and model them and build a model and go, how many players are going to play this game mode? How often are they going to play it? How's this game mode going to cannibalize other game modes in the game? Go ahead and model that impact. And then you can further model how does introducing this game mode impact the rest of the game? And then somewhere down the line, someone will be like, this game mode is going to be net, let's make them like 20 million a year. And then you go, oh, how's that going to be 20 million a year? And the designer or producer will be like, players are going to buy power-ups while they're in this game mode and they're going to love it. And we're going to make 20 million off that. And you go, okay. And then you go through and you build another model and you go, okay, we're going to have this many players coming in the game mode this often. You want to make 20 million a year. A conversion is worth this amount of much. Because of the system of the game mode, players can actually only buy a maximum of 2 power-ups every round of the game or something. And you go ahead and model that out. And then you model out what your competitor's converting. And then you might go back and say like to the game designers, oh, look, like your game design is actually solid. I actually think you're going to make $22 million. I think you can make 30 million if you do X, Y, and Z, and here's why. Or on the flip side, you go back and you say, for you to make $20 million, players right now are spending on average $5 a week in our game, they would have to spend $14 a week in our game. And we're seeing in competitors that their equivalent of this game mode actually has even lower conversion than the main game mode. And so do you think we're going to triple conversion with this game? And then you have a conversation. And then that's like, a lot of business books will be like, this is soft power, soft influence, or blah, blah, blah. But you're doing the same job as you would if you outright own the game mode as the product manager. But you're working with the design team who, in this instance, might own the game mode, or a producer might own the game mode and be calling the shots. But you're still doing the same job. And the job is, how do we deliver the best game mode possible? And we all agree on what the game mode's going to be for like the designers or something. And then you're answering the question, like, what does this look like? And sure, at the end of the day, maybe you work at a not great game company and the producer or design director is like, I don't care about numbers. I care about feelings, and we're going to ship it anyways. And then maybe the game mode succeeds or fails. Like, this stuff happens. But that's the job, is like, whether you own the game mode or not and you're designing it from yourself versus whether product owns nothing and it's almost like a quasi support role at your studio, you're still doing the same steps and you're still influencing. You're just not making the final decision, but your job's to help them make the best decisions and translate the business goals into game design and translate their game designs back into the business outcomes. And so it's weird because at first I would like join companies, and I'd be like frustrated because like maybe at the previous company I could like run rampant and do whatever I wanted, right? And then this new company, everyone's like, "What? Why are you like yelling at like this team to do this work? They don't have to listen to you." But then like as you grow up and you get more experience and you get more confidence, you realize it almost doesn't matter if you have the power to make decisions or you don't have the power to make decisions. When a studio is running well, making the decision isn't even the hard part. The decision should be so obvious because everyone has the right information that it makes itself. And that's kind of like where good product manager can step in. And so whether you own it or not, the steps are the same and you should make the decision as obvious as possible. And sure, like there are instances where like people will just ignore numbers and that's just the way it is. But yeah, I mean, I think the more I go into product management, the more the differences at companies as far as like what the role is don't matter.
The key word I think that you mentioned is influence. The way I've always seen product is it's not leadership through authority, it's leadership through influence. Like, can you influence teams to make the right decision without having to impose it? Because a lot of times there are a lot of different levels of product manager. You can have junior, associate, mid-level product manager, senior, director of product. It can go all the way up. Any product manager at any level, the job should be not, we should do this because I said so. The job should be, we should do this because of X, Y, and Z. Here's the metrics. Here's the player research. Here's the competitive analysis. And that almost becomes what I find the true fun of product is using the tools that you have, the teams around you, the commercial analysts, the designers, QA, speaking to all the different teams, collecting the research, doing your own modeling, and then coming up with a pitch that is, like you just said, impossible to say no, because at the end of the day, that's the easy part. The easy part is just it's actually taking the decision should be super straightforward if the information is there. It's hard if it's not.
Yeah. I mean, and if you want to even turn it on, I don't know, management psychology, you do all the research and hand it over and then you go, team, what should we do? And then see what they say instead of like making any decisions. Like, go ahead. I will say here's another wrench in everything I just said though, is one thing we do have to remember about games, and this is a tricky thing about product management, is just like we'll go back to the Nirvana moment. If there were product managers in the music industry, every product manager in the music industry would have been like, oh yeah, we need to get another Poison record out or like Motley Crue or something, right? And no product manager would have been like, actually, there's this grungy, almost like unhoused person named Kurt Cobain in Seattle. That's going to be the next like business force in like no one would have saw that coming. And there's a lot of these in the game industry. Like vampire survivors coming out of nowhere to be like a phenomenon. There's a lot of this stuff where hindsight 2020, I'm sure people were like, I saw all these hit games coming out of nowhere, whatever. But we have to remember this is a creative field. And so there is like a constant subject is the balance between art and creative, because we can find the numbers to prove anything and we can find the numbers to disprove anything. And so as much as it's easy to talk about like modeling game modes and stuff, it's really hard to see the impact of stuff that are unknown, or the impact of like true art excellence that aren't in the numbers. And so let me think of like a recent example, or here, like the best example is like From Software and their climb from Demon Souls to like Elden Ring. Like, no one in their right mind would be like, you know what the public really craves is like one hit kill, super hard games where you lose all your progress, that are in gothic, like rated R worlds with storylines that are so convoluted. Even when I'm playing them, I'm like, what, this demon, or what am I doing right now? And like, but like, that's an example where like no product manager would make Elden Ring, right? And greenlight Elden Ring. Or they would, but no one would have been like, oh yeah, this is going to be the game of the year. That's going to set records for that year. And so it's very difficult to, as a product manager, like we live and die by the numbers, but at the same time, this is art and execution counts, quality counts, the zeitgeist of like the gaming public counts, what's going on with like politics or music and movies also influence games. And so you can't see everything in numbers and metrics. And that's why I always go back to like, you're trying to maximize success, but at the same time, you can't game design by numbers. And I think that's where like mobile really has like been stuck for a long time, is the games are mostly commodity. And so they just do everything by numbers in mobile. And there's very low wiggle room outside of like the Genshin Impact like quality of games to really like differentiate or counterposition on mobile. And so that's when you get like a really stale industry where like everything's the same, like match 3, or everything's the same game systems with different game mechanics and the same layered game systems, cut and paste across every game that's top 20 grossing games. And if you apply that to other parts of the industry and you go like hardcore metrics driven design and you do everything based on the numbers, you might find yourself losing at the end of developing that game and not really understanding. So it's quite a difficult thing, because I've been a designer, like again, RDR2. Nobody's like green lighting a slow burn story driven cowboy game in the dying days of the old west. No product manager is sitting around like right now and is like, yeah, I think that's the that's the target audience that we need to go. Mature, slow story where you ride around in like the range for hours and stuff. So that's all to say, like everything I describe and we describe as product management, you do represent the business outcomes. But at some point, you also have to acknowledge that art and execution can't be captured. You can't capture how good your art director is. Like Okami, remember the game Okami is like, that art direction is going to be very difficult to be captured, how much impact Okami's art direction had on its sales during development. And so it's stuff like that that's like makes the job super hard and makes the job like, it's not as easy as I just lined up, where it's just like, oh yeah, you modeled the game mode, modeled the audience, it's going to make this amount of money.
Well, one thing we
We
haven't
did it.
mentioned yet, one thing we haven't mentioned yet is vision, right? Carrying the
Yes.
torch. Like for me, I'm speaking personally for myself as a product manager. I may not be as strong in the modeling, and I do know how to use metrics. But again, am I able to crunch the numbers in a financial way? I wouldn't say that's my forte, but I do see an emerging discipline in product where you're working with teams to understand what the vision is, where kind of the unique selling point is for the game, and then championing that. So using that Red Dead Redemption 2 example, like a slow kind of open world horse game where maybe it doesn't make sense on paper long term because it's such a huge investment. If there's a strong vision that feels unique and you see it across the teams, I think a great product manager is beyond hyper focusing on the business outcomes and making sure that at the end of the day we're making money. It's also seeing long term that this is something that we can deliver that can really drive an impact, unlike anything else. But in order to get there, um, you need someone to champion that. So what's your perspective?
I mean, that's the job, right? And so like that's the art of oh, I hate that I just said that. But that's the art of product. Like
Yeah, it's the
that's
art,
the
sure.
gray area, right? And so for every RDR2, there's a mermaid world stories where we had 40 mermaids going on underwater adventures. But like there was a product vision for that game too. And there was like people who were really compelled. We had all these mermaids. I keep going back to this game because it's just a funny game to go beat up on. But like there are like 40 plus mermaids. They all had their own personalities and likes and dislikes. And it's like, it's hard. It's hard. And different product managers have different styles on that gray area. And I would say once the base skill sets are like aligned, that's what separates product managers is knowing when to go super hard in the numbers and just go by metrics and numbers and maximizing business, knowing when to support a vision, knowing when like sometimes the vision or the team or the talent or the idea is so compelling that you know that you need to just help that be as good as possible. And then there's other times where you might have to kill a game. And I've killed games in development a few times where like the team was really passionate about the game and I have to be the one to like build a bunch of models and go to like the C-suite and be like, you got to kill this game. Like it's just not going to happen. And a lot of times when I go, like this is me personally, when I do that, it becomes like a numbers thing. Like we don't have enough artists and other people to get the content done to like hit the numbers we have to hit. Cause like one example was in the heyday of battle royale. It was a battle royale-esque game. And for battle royale games, you need to have like a minimum number of concurrent players, right? Or else the game crashes. It's like that ecology life cycle thing. So you need to solve the cold start problem and you need to have like a minimum number of concurrents during prime hours every day. Or if people log on and see every single person's a bot, they're never going to play again. So you have to like hit that threshold. And I had to kill a game because I didn't think we had enough content and enough of compelling like counter positioning to the games that already like sucked in and retained the users we're going after to hit those concurrents. And I built a bunch of models and I looked at like the industry and I had to go get the game killed. And I worked with the people on the team to understand it wasn't like this like big betrayal or something, which is but that's part of the job is like at what point do you green light a game and like really champion it through and do everything you can to help it through? And then at some point you're going to be high up enough that you have to decide whether like the vision or the talent or the team and all of that gray area stuff can overcome the business realities of how difficult it would be for that game design to succeed. And that's kind of like the art of it is like there is no right answer with that because if you went on that, then every game would be a Call of Duty clone or insert whatever, the top grossing game is. And then if you didn't do that, then every game, 90% of games would be Mermaid World stories where it'd be like some crazy like vision that really didn't pan out and like probably could have been reined in many cycles milestones ago. So
I mean, on that
yeah.
point, sometimes the worst decisions are not taking a decision and just
Yes. Yeah.
stalling, right? And that's what product management is there for at the end of the day. You have to take a decision, you have to own it, you have to explain why, and it's a hard job in that way. It's also very rewarding. It's also very stimulating, but you are championing a vision and you are taking a decision at the end of the day. Um, let's talk. We mentioned metrics, and I think it's always important to talk about metrics because that's kind of what you're using to evaluate a game beyond the qualitative side of research and talking to players and creating that empathy. Maybe looking at user tests, bringing players to doing any kind of cluster analysis, blah blah blah. At the end of the day, we're looking at game health and metrics to understand how that game is doing. You mentioned daily active users or DAO. Can we just kind of go through a list one by one and just mention and explain? Like we said LTV before. I'm sure some people are asking what lifetime
Oh,
value, what does
yeah.
that mean? So we can go through one by one. I think that'd be really valuable.
Yeah, I'll go through so preface, this is like general consensus, but you might go to places where, things are measured differently, things are categorized differently. I'll go through what I generally see and what I categorize metrics at when I join games or companies. So at the top, you have active user metrics. So this is measuring a type of user within a time period. So daily, the most common DAU, WAU, MAU, daily active users, weekly active users, monthly active users. So how many unique users in that time period? And then below that, you can categorize users like buyers and non-buyers. So did like someone, or payers and non-payers, did someone purchase an in-app purchase within that? You can categorize people by like progression in the game, like players beyond level 30 and so on. And so those are active user metrics. You're measuring unique users or a subset of type of users within a period. And they're really good for, measuring the growth of your game and how many people are playing it. Um, but they don't tell you how people are playing it. And so that's where you get to the second set of metric categories, which are engagement metrics. So if you have 100 active users, daily active users, you don't know if those users are logging in for 1 second and closing the game, or are they playing like 8 hours straight in some kind of hardcore session. And so engagement metrics tell you that. And engagement metrics are tricky. Like active user metrics are generally similar across games. What I like to do for engagement metrics is I like to start with the lowest and build up in what I call gameplay containers. And so we'll use Madden as an example. So in Madden, what is the lowest like segmented gameplay in Madden? It's a down in football. And so a down is, I don't, people might listen to this. We're talking about American football. So a down is like you do a play, and then whenever the ball gets dropped or they score a touchdown or they run out of bounds or they get tackled, the ref blows a whistle. And so the beginning of the down is from the hike of the ball, like, and then, yeah, people can figure it
They'll
out, but
understand. Yeah, yeah.
they'll understand. So a down of the football is the lowest. And then above that is a game of football. And so in Madden, we don't know if they're playing all 4 quarters or they're playing like a smaller game that's just 1 quarter. So we can't do quarters above downs. And so it's a down, a game, and then above a game is a session. And a session is from when you log in to when you log out, or however you qualify it for your game. The beginning of gameplay of someone playing the game, and then the end. And then above session is days and then weeks. And so think about your gameplay containers as answering this sentence. How many downs per game? How many did I play? How many games per session did I play? How many sessions per day did I play? How many days per week did I play? And how many weeks per month? And then you could do other combinations, like you do sessions per month or days per month. But that's how I think about building up gameplay containers. And so in other games like a match 3, the lowest gameplay container is a swipe, where you like reverse 2 pieces. So how many swipes per game or per level, and then how many levels per, and so on and so on, however your game's like organized. And so that is a good way to tell you how much people are playing. So in Madden, downs played is a great, because a down is generally around the same amount of time. And so downs played is a great engagement metric to use across everyone, and then building up that metric. So that'll tell you how often people are, or how much people are playing your game. And really quick aside, it's very easy to want to use time. Try never to use time. Don't do minutes in the game, because minutes in the game doesn't tell you everything. And you want to get like you want to be like Neo seeing the Matrix. You want to, when you finish mapping out all your metrics, you want to be able to see everything and understand everything. And so minutes don't give you enough information, but gameplay container segments do. So then the next one is, are the people from like one DAU to another the same people, right? And so that's where retention comes in. And so retention very quickly is like, how many people from one time period played in another time period. And so that can be week over week retention. So if you had 100 people playing in 1 week and 100 people playing the following week, what percent of the people from the first week were playing that next week? In mobile games, you'll see this a lot. They use calendar day retention. So you'll see like D1, D7, D14, D30. That means specific days. Because, and I'll go into this for a second, but like, so if D0 is the day that someone installed the game or first played, D1 is that next calendar day, and D7 is that seventh calendar day after install. Whereas other games might do, instead of D7, they might do like seventh day retention, like how many people made it to the seventh day of gameplay. And that seventh day could have been the seventh day of the week, or it could have been like months later and they just like played once a month or something. How you choose retention is also wildly different per game. So a lot of mobile games expect you to play every day, and the whole game's designed around playing every day. So they want to measure that rate, because their goal is to get you to play every game. For a game like Madden or a lot of like console games, maybe once a week is good. So I like to measure things on a weekly retention rate. Maybe some games really like monthly. Like if you had a old school WoW or EverQuest with monthly subscriptions, maybe monthly retention rates are really important because it's how you get paid, right? So how figuring out your retention rate, whether to do like exact calendar days or do week over week retention and rolling retention, it all really depends on what your desire is for people to come back and play the game. And so that's retention. Um, Here's a tough one, is stickiness. And so when you hear people talk about stuff, they a common thing I see interchanged is engagement, stickiness, and retention. And people will just use them freely. And to some extent, it can kind of make sense to use them freely, right? Like if you're talking about engagement, like how many downs were played over a monthly period, it could almost be a proxy for retention on some way. But I'll define stickiness as how much engagement in one time period incurred in another. And so how many days per week did someone play? How many like downs per month did someone play in Madden? And the most common stickiness metrics are simply dividing DAU by WAU or DAU by MAU. Those aren't the best because if everyone just played one day a week and then your DAU for one day would be like 100, and then the WAU would be 100, and then every other day of the week would be 0, your like stickiness metric would be messed up depending on whether you did like rolling averages and all this other stuff. So it's easier to just take days per week and stuff like that and just total up the days someone played in a weekly time period and divide it by like the week or month than it is to like do the stickiness ratio metrics. But just think about stickiness as a bridge between engagement and retention, as they tell you like the rate of engagement over a time period. That one's a bit more complicated. You can kind of ignore it if you want. And then after that, revenue metrics. And so this is where how many ways can you define like how people are purchasing and interacting with purchases. So we talked about LTV. LTV means lifetime value, and it's different everywhere, but it's really like how much do you expect your average player to spend on your game over a single lifetime once they start playing the game. I've seen companies calculated on like a 180-day basis. I've seen it like varied back in the napkin math. And then on the other end, I've worked at super analytical companies that are like, we acquired this customer through this meta ad word tag, and they came in through this acquisition source, and we paid this much for them. And then we saw within week 1, they hit these milestones. So we know exactly that their LTV is going to be 48. And then they'll even bifurcate. This is like hardcore mobile games, they'll give that person a completely different game experience than someone who's going to be worth like under $10 LTV, right? And so LTV can be like, revenue metrics can go as hardcore as the company needs them to go. And um, so you have like LTV, and on the other side of LTV, you have like cost of user acquisition or user acquisition cost or return on ad spend. And it's like, especially in the mobile world, how much should you pay to acquire that user? And so if in some of these like game categories like war strategy or social casino, you might pay like $48, $50 to acquire a user. And so you need to be very sure, if you're acquiring thousands of users at $50 a user, that you're going to get some return on that investment, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't pay to acquire these users. And so that's like one side of revenue metrics. The other side is doing the purchase funnel. So like conversions, how often do people, how many transactions do they have? What's the value of the transactions? How many items do they buy per transaction? What's the value of those items? And you can do different ratios based on that. Revenue metrics wildly different per game. Like some games are purely ad supported, and so their like revenue metrics are going to be completely different. It's going to be like, what's the average um what's the average cost per million or thousand of impressions, right? And like, and then other games are going to have like some crazy outside spender ratio, or like 1% of players earn you 98% of your revenue,
The
and then the
whales,
rest of the
right?
play. Yeah. I don't want to use that word, but
No,
it's
I know
like,
it's no. You don't. It's dolphins. What if they changed it now?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. It's like,
okay,
I've heard like we call them VIP players, but like
VIPs. Yeah.
you get these games where like, frankly, they're popped up on players who spend $2,000 a month. And then like your entire metrics on revenue are just around that player, and almost the other players are just content for those players in your game. And so, yeah, revenue is that. And those are the basic metric categories. Now, there's a billion metric and acronyms that are going to like confuse you. I used to joke when I wasn't a PM and I first encountered product managers at a game company. I was like, are you guys just making up acronyms? Are you trolling me? Like, you came in, you're just like, you're like, the ARPDAO is down 8%. And I'm like, ARPDAO? What does that
Oh,
even mean?
average
What are you even
revenue per.
talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah, yeah. It's just like a laundry list. But
Yeah.
is the key skill for a product manager? I mean, this is how I've always seen it. You have to be able to tell a story from these metrics first and foremost. So you're going to get a list of metrics and be like, okay, what does this mean? And it's not just understanding in terms of what decision you need to make, but you need to be able to tell a story to someone else. So um, depending on the type of game, there will be different metrics that matter. And on that point specifically, there's something called vanity metrics versus actionable
Oh,
metrics.
yeah.
And that's a big one, right? Because if you were like, when I'm teaching product management students in the course I teach outside of the podcast, um, one of the first things is that you may think session length is a very kind of strong metric, but session length could mean that someone opens up the title screen, just forgets that the game is on, and the game's just running, and on paper it looks great, like wow, players are really playing, but what you're looking for is actually specific metrics that indicate gameplay, that indicate actions that may lead towards revenue generation, or may improve retention because they're having fun getting towards that gameplay loop. And so what are your thoughts on kind of vanity versus actionable?
Yeah. I would say there are no, yeah, vanity metrics. It's not like one metric is bad and one metric is good. They're all
Mm.
measurements, right? And in one game, even something like games played might end up being a vanity metric, weirdly, depending on like the game, right? But in reality, like your example, it's very easy to measure something that doesn't tell the complete story up or down. And so a lot of these metrics sit somewhere in like an engagement or a revenue funnel. And we can talk about metric funnels in a bit, but like, and so if you just look at the one metric in the middle going up or down, like let's say ARPDAO, then you celebrate or condemn something based on ARPDAO going up and down. Well, ARPDAO could go like ARPDAO. Sorry, I keep saying it. It's average revenue per daily active user. It's the ultimate like
It's the holy
alphabet soup
grail of
metric.
metrics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, like you're looking at this metric go up or down, but it could go up or down because you just had a sell and you had a hangover from a sell and everyone already like bought all the purchases and you pulled forward revenue. And so you need a lot of metrics to get the full view. And some of these metrics, that's why I don't like time-based metrics that much, because like you said, time in app could mean I don't know what I'm doing in the UI and I'm confused and I'm lost. And I'll take it a step further as far as like metrics. You need to really think about what metrics you present to everyone, because in a dream studio, even your art team and your game design team understand all these metrics. They understand that they need to like push some metric up or down, or that like we're doing good or bad because some metric is up or down. And so let's say session length was a metric that everyone looked at, producers, the executive team, and they're like, oh, good job, guys. This game mode you release, session length went up. But then you don't realize like everyone's just stuck in this game mode. It's grindy. It takes forever. It's actually killing retention rate. Everyone who plays the game mode leads the game. It's killing conversion. It's killing everything. But you chose that as your KPI, which is a KPI. It stands for key performance indicator. It's like a North Star metric, one of the most important metrics in the game that we all look at every day or every week together. And we say good or bad because it's up or down. And you made session length as the product manager as your KPI. And now designers are making decisions based on what will drive session length up. And now the game is this like horrible game. Everything's tedious. Everything's taking forever. Everyone's churning on the game. You're losing your players. No one's purchasing all this stuff. But session length keeps climbing higher and higher. And like you have like the Sorcerer's Apprentice issue where Mickey created all those brooms to like do his chores, and then he ended up flooding like that tower in Fantasia. You have that same issue here where you made session length as your KPI, and now everyone's optimizing session length, and the game's actually in a death spiral, but
I,
session length's going up.
I have such a good example. I think this is super pertinent. I was talking about it with my friend Kieran. We play League of Legends and sometimes, and there's this new game mode in ARAM where basically it's all random, all mid, and everyone's in one lane. But they've done it in a way where you have these power-ups that make your champion super strong, and it's very addicting. And every time you get into a game, you get given a random champion, and you jump in. And it's a super addicting game mode because it is the polar opposite of the normal game mode, which is like you pick your champion, you go into your lane, and it's like it takes up to 15-20 minutes for the game to start getting kind of to that point where you feel strong and you can compete. And we were talking about it. I kind of realized as I was playing ARAM, like this might actually hurt Riot because players who play ARAM may not be incentivized to pay for the number one way they make money, skins. Because if you're getting given random
Yeah.
champions and you're playing these quick bursty game modes, you're not playing that long-term normal mode where you're kind of getting affection to the champion. You want to self-express yourself with a new skin. That's all gone. You don't even want to pay for champions if you're a new player because you're just going to get a random one in ARAM. So I was just questioning and looking at, on paper, this looks great for Riot. Like they found a super addicting game mode that everyone's playing and you can see it. It's doing super well. But I question how long they're going to leave it because I think it will. My prediction. I'm not trying to. I don't know anything, but I just feel like that's going to hurt their bottom line in the long run.
No, yeah, I completely agree. And what you just did is something I think a lot of people, product managers and aspiring product managers, should do, is look at these successful games and think why they do or don't put stuff in the game. Because one thing with League everyone always complains about is, why are the CPUs so bad? Why are there not? And it's like, well, why? I mean, Riot has some of the smartest people in the entire game industry working there. Why do you think they don't have these like robust, complex AI people you can compete against? And same thing with like ARAM and some of the other wackier game modes that they've brought in and
Earth,
then
yeah.
like taken out. Yeah. And some of the even ways you acquire like skins and stuff, they've dabbled in a few different ways you can acquire champions and skins. And like it's very true that like even these big companies try stuff and then they see that like although maybe the PM for ARAM, this new ARAM power up mode is like killing it. And they're like KPIs are through the roof. And they're like, man, I'm going to get a promotion. I'm going to get a bonus. Like my new game mode's off the whatever. And like, then like the director of product or like whoever the head of League of Legends is looking at the full picture and everything is like, okay, unfortunately, we're going to have to make this a limited seasonal game mode that only appears every now and then for fun. But like it's cannibalizing everything. Like you said, there's no reason to buy champions. There's no reason to buy skins. It's actually making the attention span of the players too low that they can't even do the laning phase of like a regular game and stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and you mentioned it. Like one of the key skills for a product for anyone, I think, who wants to get into games is trying to understand why. There's a reason to almost every decision. A great company will be doing something because there's a North Star metric or a KPI that they're trying to hit. And you could look at if, let's say, this ARAM stays for another 6 months, and we're questioning why. It could be that for the company, for Riot in general, they have a new MMO coming out. They have the next season of Arcane that they're working on. And for them, it may be more valuable to acquire users and have them play within their launcher and just playing League of Legends and getting into their ecosystem than it is for them to make money on skins, and that they may have a more longer term goal. Pure speculation, but this is the game that you're doing in product, and these are the outcomes that you should be expecting that go all the way up to the highest ranks.
mm-hmm. And yeah, this is where junior product managers and lower level product managers, like the exact story you just told is perfect. Is like you could imagine a mid-level product manager owning that game mode and then thinking only on how to maximize active users, engagement, and retention within that game mode and only thinking about that KPI. And then way at the top, you have the VP of product who's thinking about a transmedia strategy and what is going to set up Riot for 5 years from now. Whereas the director of product for League of Legends is thinking months from now. And then that product manager on that one game mode is thinking just of that game mode and like, what are the weekly, maybe they have to fire off a weekly report and they just want to keep that hockey stick going. And they're like, oh my God, how do I make this weekly report better than the last one? And so I think if you're anywhere in that chain, it's great to understand the chain below you and above you. And if you don't understand that, to your point, if you don't understand that at the highest level, there's a whole transmedia strategy that's thinking 5 or 10 years. It's thinking multiple releases. It's thinking, how do we keep like League of Legends in the zeitgeist of players when it's like 1 trillion years old at this point? If you don't understand that above you, and then at the same time, that VP of product doesn't understand that mid-level product manager who owns ARAM is just only concerned about these 3 things in their weekly report, like there's going to be like misfirings, and that's how you get like big business problems in game companies. But yeah, everyone on the chain should understand everything above and below them.
And that chain, one of the things that we teach in product is how every vision, like if we imagine the company vision as a triangle, at the top you have kind of C-suite level vision, or just the company vision for the entire company. And then you start going down and you get into the product vision for the company. And then within the product, you get the feature vision. And that's how you can see how product managers, or just the product discipline itself, kind of gets broken down, exactly like you're saying, into this chain. And I guess my question for you is, what happens when that chain is incoherent? What happens when the company vision at the top is not matching the product vision for another product, and there starts to being some kind of disconnect between the two? Because I think that's one of the hardest things, I think, for a great company to have, is a coherent vision. Like that, it's so hard to be able to get everyone to really understand this is what we're here for, and this is what we're trying to drive through. And I mean, Simon Sinek gave a great talk on why vision matters from a consumer level, because it speaks to a part of the brain that's more emotional and less irrational, which is like, I'm buying this because Apple has a great vision. At least it did. But going back, what happens when there's an incoherency in that chain?
Yeah, it's I mean, that's how you get these like massive screw ups where games, I'm not going to call out any modern games, but there's a few games that used to be juggernauts that are now on giant downswings. If you look at like their revenue and earnings and their active users, from where they were like 3 years ago. And that's how you get that misconnection. And a lot of it, I think again, everyone in the chain should understand where they are, but it definitely comes from the top, and it comes from the vision at the top and the management. And so it's really good to have strong product leaders who not only see a short, medium, and long-term vision, but then are able to communicate that downward. And that's how it builds like the culture of like, how does that ARAM League of Legends PM make decisions? And so I've seen it good and bad where everyone's in their own silo. I've worked on a mobile game once, and we had like weekly weekend events, and like the weekends events ended up being like so fun that they pulled all the revenue from the middle of the week to just the weekends. So instead of it being like a slight U, it became like a hard U shape because like no one spent during the week because the regular game ended up being like way less fun than the weekend events that we ran. And so is that good or bad? I didn't even know I was running the weekend events, but my job, I was like awesome because we were making all this revenue. Now, it could have been a strategy that like that was the strategy. It also could have been that no one had a strategy and it was just make as much money as possible so we can hit our monthly goals. And so I think if you look at good product management leadership, it's really instilling that culture of how we make decisions and why we're making them all the way from the top down. And you as a junior product manager, or mid-level product manager, or senior, whoever's not like a VP of product, you have the ability to make that decision with everything below you, and not below you as in like game designers are below you, but everyone else making decisions. So I see like not only is the disconnect between like the high level strategy, portfolio strategy at the top versus like the in the weeds, like feature owners at the bottom. But there's another giant disconnect is like product production and game design or some combination of roles. Understanding why we all make the decisions we make and how important each one is like constantly fighting with like what, why do we need to make this more difficult so players are incentivized to either purchase or try really hard to get this rare item? And then how do we create systems that make this rare item even more desirable or perceived valuable? Are we using social? Are we using like mechanical, like numbers? Are we using something else? And the games are so hard. And so this is where like these strategies are so hard, or these cultures are so hard to implement at companies. And it's why you see certain companies like Riot or, even Valve, who's a bit more mysterious because they're not as like publicly facing, but why a lot of these companies seem to last forever. And a lot of it really is culture. And a lot of that culture, whether they want to admit it or not, is like product strategy and how that gets, um, distributed across the company versus like other companies that you see might have like a giant success and then really like fumble the success, fumble the follow up. Maybe the game just like they make a bunch of bad decisions is because there's no coherent strategy at the top, or if there is a great strategy at the top, it's not being implemented all the way down.
Yeah, it's
And
not being.
so, yeah, if you find yourself on that bottom, you know, as a person who gets in trouble sometimes at companies for, uh, managing up too hard, I would say. I do think there is a place for if you feel like you don't understand a lot of these decisions. I think like the VPs and director don't go to them and be like, I don't understand anything. You're terrible at your job. Maybe not the best strategy, but like go to them as an opportunity, like, hey, I don't even know why we're making these or that decisions. And maybe some other people don't know this either. I think this is an opportunity for you to like really like lay out the culture, lay out the long-term strategy, and help us all understand how to make better decisions. And I think stuff like that is again another like whatever soft influence, something, but it's a way to like manage up and let leadership know because they need to know what's lacking below or above. And maybe you guys do find out like the product strategy isn't great. A lot of game companies go under. But maybe you find out the product strategy is super solid and we just didn't know about it. And we didn't know that there's like a 5-year game plan for us to go from like the number 5 game in this category to the number 1 game. And there's a lot of moving parts and you're not aware of them. Or
Yeah.
maybe it uncovers a giant weakness. And then now there's an opportunity for you to step up and for you to like implement the strategy for the VP or like write out a strategy or propose a strategy for the long-term vision. So like, yeah, the advice I would give myself who's made all the mistakes at managing my career that a human can make is, yeah, sometimes, like any problem is an opportunity for you. And going back to what we said about like our careers and like how you can like break into the industry or grow in the industry. This is how you, even if you don't get promotions now, it's how you like grow as a person. So when you are like leading a company, you now know you already did the work. And so anytime there's like a big miss at your company, go and like identify the miss, present it as an opportunity. And then if that person doesn't want to solve it, offer to solve it yourself. Like, oh, let me present a portfolio strategy and see what you think.
I think
And
one
then
thing
now
with
you have experience doing that.
I absolutely agree with everything you've said. And one thing about product, because I've also been making my own mistakes in terms of managing my own career. It's a product is a very political role. It's incredibly political because, not everyone can take decisions. And in my experience, I've noticed in companies, there's a lot of self-preservation. I think people are, especially when you get those like product people in the mid level who are kind of reporting to C-suite, they're trying to keep the ship steady. And I completely respect that. But what I've found difficult is that you're trying to not manage upwards, but you're ruffling feathers essentially by saying, "Hey, maybe we could do this instead. Maybe we should be prioritizing here." And for all you know, the CEO could agree with you. The director of product could agree with you. But it's those middle managers that are kind of there. It's all a big chain, and then you get into like how the hierarchy of the company works. And what I'm trying to say is that what I've learned is that you need to be careful. And despite a mentor of mine once told me, if you're not ruffling some feathers, you're not being a real product manager, because you have to fight against the tide sometimes and kind of look for the answer. Because if you're just following the same direction the whole time, you're not really being objective. But I think for anyone listening, it's a political role. Um, Push, be brave, go for your values, but also understand that, if things do go wrong, you're learning. Exactly what you said that just resonated really strong with me is that you take something away, and the next time you're in that position, you've done the work and you've pushed hard, and you've kind of, in a way, you've mustered the courage to fight for something that you think is objectively true, will be great for the company, will be great for the game itself and the players. But that's a risk. And that's the only thing I'm coming from, is that you are dealing in a political arena. It's not, I think other games teams, not necessarily the same because of the decision-making aspect of product.
Yeah. I can expand on this really well because I've been so product management didn't really hit mobile games early in the 2010s. And then it like when I worked at Rockstar, there weren't product managers. So it was like technical game designers and producers kind of filled in that to some degree, but it was a huge gap missing. And then it was like by 2016 to 2018, everything had product managers on it. Even like most AAA game companies had them. But I remember back in the day when product managers, before I came one, I'd be like, man, these people don't know. They ruin games. They're like anti-fun, blah, 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 blah. Right. And like, they don't know what they're doing. They just care about money. And because they're greedy, they're like going to ruin the game and the players are going to leave and we're going to whatever. And especially if it happens to you, like you get a bad product manager who's like, it'd be cool if we just tripled our prices. And you're like, oh my God, I can't believe like, with triple revenue, tripling prices. And you're like, are you serious right now? And then
The
everyone
inevitable
loses their
price
job.
rise. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, well aware.
And then what's funny is I made the full transition. So I remember I had this director of product and I'd be like, I was a senior gameplay engineer and I would be like making fun gameplay and game modes and whatever. And then I'd be like, oh my God, this like game mode isn't fun. And then he would look at the metrics and he'd be like, well, it has this retention. And I go like, yeah, but this is crap. And he goes, you know what, Eric, there is no metric for fun. And then I became a product manager and reported to him. And then like a year later, I find myself telling some game designer, I'm like, there is no metric for fun. So like, this is the whole Batman thing, like
You
live
became
long
the
enough and
villain. Yeah, you become
become
the villain.
the villain. But like, it's true. I will say this, like, product management is the closest thing to business outcomes. And so unless you're like a director of game design or the game director, as a game designer, you can hide away from like the business outcomes that your decisions have, right? But as product, you can't. Even a junior product manager should know whether they screwed up or not and whether like it impacted revenue or whatever KPIs they're responsible for. And then the more you move up, the more pressure comes because you can get everyone laid off. You can get a large amount of people laid off. People have to like, some people are the only breadwinners in their family, and you can get 10 people or 100 people to lose their job, and that is your fault. And it can be 100% your fault. It's really hard for a senior gameplay engineer to get 100 people to lose their job unless you have like a crazy bug in the game that you didn't see and nobody found it before long and stuff like that. As a product manager, beyond easy. Like I've seen games go down so fast, like successful games who are making like $1 million a week go to making like $100,000 a week so fast because of a string of bad decisions, right? And so I'm not going to give people who are like who are afraid of making decisions or super conservative with decision making a pass, but I will say, having been there to where like I was the game designer bitching about the suits coming in and ruining games and stuff, and then having to been the guy who has to report to like public shareholders on a weekly basis and explain why revenue went up or down, and being the one who's ultimately responsible for like on a number of games for like everyone's well-being to the point where like you're responsible for revenue, and then if revenue goes down, everyone's going to lose their job, including you. And some of these people, it's going to be hard for them to find another job, and their lives are going to be like insanely impacted. It's hard, and you don't see everything until you get to the top of the mountain. And then when you get to the top of the mountain, you see um you see all the angles you didn't see when you were climbing up. And so I'll say that like, this isn't to say there are a lot of people who just sit by and watch their game death spiral and don't make decisions. There are a lot of people who are good or bad at their job, but man, it's wildly different looking back to being like a game designer working at these scrappy mobile companies to like being in positions where I've been in where like I was on the hook for like 800 million a year or something, like, and you're just like, the decisions you have to make in those instances, if you make if you make one if you make one like drawing a straight line is making every decision you made last year again, and you make one jagged edge, that jagged edge could cost you $15 million. And then $15 million missing from your revenue could set off a chain reaction that 2 years from now, your marketing budget is in half, and then you're getting like much lower quality users, and then your game starts to death spiral, and then everyone loses their job. And then that might have been the anchor game for that whole studio. And then the whole studio has to scramble and crunch and figure out what to do, all because of like one decision you made in like January that made January revenue be down 20%. And so, yeah, when you're at the top, it's a lot of pressure. And this goes back to like what we were talking about earlier of like offering to do work above your pay grade ahead of time. Like, it's so nice when you see openings in your company or holes, to go ahead and get that experience. Because let's say you don't see that portfolio 5-year strategy in your company from your product director, and maybe there isn't one. Offer to do one and present it, and then they can tear it apart, and you might feel bad because you like put in a lot of work on this, and then they were like, this is missing this, but like all the experience you're getting is golden until you're in the hot seat. And then you're at the point where, like, oh my God, if I choose left or right and I choose the wrong one, literally I look out and I'm like, some of these people are going on unemployment and their kids aren't going to get Christmas or something, like, and maybe worse. And so that's all just to say, like, take this chance in your career to, like, learn as much and do as much work as you can, because if you keep progressing, at some point you're going to be making those 1, 10, $100 million decisions potentially. And it's like, you don't want that to be the first time that you're coming up with a portfolio strategy for a multi-studio publisher. You want to have tons of practice well before then. Otherwise you could end up sinking. And there's like so many classic examples of like publishers who were so great. I used to work at WB Games, and I don't think people will argue. Like, WB Games at one point was like a force, and now they're not really like spoken of, and they're not really releasing games. And so, like, it can happen, and you can be the person that causes that. So this is the time in your career to like get as much practice making those decisions and sharpening your skills, because unlike maybe some other roles, this is like the most obvious role where because you read the metrics every day, that you actually cause this problem and what the effects of that problem are.
Yeah, I think that's just incredibly wise what you've said. I mean, it really resonated with me. And I think it resonates with a lot of other people, especially people that maybe are looking on the outside and not necessarily in a product position. But with great power comes great responsibility. And if you don't have that empathy for kind of decisions need to be made, and there are a lot of people on the hook, like these game studios are families of people that if they lose their jobs, it's a disaster. Like it's
Yeah.
especially now the games industry is tough. So it does kind of give a lot of perspective. And I'm speaking honestly, like it really resonated with me right now. Like it does give you perspective on kind of, learning how these decisions get made and why, and the pressure that comes with it, and having to speak to a board, having to go kind of find investment or backup revenue for a certain quarter. And if you don't get there, like there are teams on the risk, and it's tough. I don't even players that are complaining about the suits. Like I was definitely one of those people. I'm not gonna.
I still do, by the way.
I still, yeah, I'm still suspicious of it, and I get it. I just see a lot of business-oriented people that don't kind of really look at the game as a game, and I get it because it is a vehicle for business. But um, I did find what you said very wise, because that's something I almost wish someone had told me way earlier instead of hearing it now in a podcast. But it makes you think. It makes you think how tough of a job it actually really is, because what is fun, what is a successful game, and how do you keep it going? Because like we said, the market is so volatile, attention is so paper thin now. I mean, Battlefield, I was making this point the other day. Battlefield came out, and then within a second Arc Raiders just ate its lunch, and it was like, sure, Battlefield is an incredible game and they worked on it for so many years, and nothing against Battlefield, but it showed that it just takes a month, and then all of a sudden that momentum you had can just completely evaporate. And it might not even be your fault, but maybe there was something you could have done.
Yeah, and that's the tough one, is like, it's almost, again, like, was there anyone who even knew Arc Raiders was going to come out and be that good and be that retentive? And it's like hard, and you don't know. And that's why I always go back to, like, your goal is to set up business success. And then in Battlefield, unfortunately, and this is like the other side, is like, we always talk about in the game industry, the rise up to launch and then the success and product of like live opsing a game for years. But then I've sunset games, and sometimes our listeners might have to sunset a game. And what that means is, like, how do you wind down a game? How do you choose who's actually need it? And how do you choose revenue forecasts for a game that's doing this? And then where does it eventually go when you like sunset it and so on? So, um, yeah, these are all like skills that aren't talked about enough, is, what happens when you are on Battlefield and then Arc Raiders comes out. What do you do? Do you maintain? Do you swing big and really try to pivot and counter position Arc Raiders? Do you do what Fortnite did when that like Save the World game that nobody even remembers. They like panicked and fast followed PUBG, who also was fast following like an Arma 3 mod. And then Fortnite just blew out from that. But the original Fortnite game mode was like, it was like a Minecraft type thing where you build and then zombies come and attack you at night. And so these are all like hard decisions, and this is where product really like makes or breaks game studios is like Battlefield. What does Battlefield do now? you know. And so I'm not going to explore it now because I don't really have the context, but that's something people should think about, like business wise. Like it's so easy as a player to say like, oh, they need to do this, but you got to look at like the whole landscape and like you have these users have these LTV, you have this retention rate. Are you acquiring new users at this point now that you did your launch and marketing push? What would it take to reactivate users that have churned to make them come back to your game? What would it take if you needed to get new users who have never played Battlefield? Who would those users be and what are they playing now? And then what would it take for you? What like game modes and art direction and marketing would it take to convince them to come over to Battlefield? And then how would you retain those players versus retaining players you already have? And would there be like a contradiction with these new players and what they're looking for in a Battlefield game versus play? And like this goes on and on and on. And there, it's like these are not easy decisions to make when you get up to Battlefield's level where like hundreds of millions of
A
dollars are
major
on the
game, yeah.
line. Yeah.
And just to add to that example further, like when Arc Raiders came out, I think a couple weeks after, or I don't know the actual time. Again, speaking a bit outside what I know, but they did introduce a battle royale mode in Battlefield. And so as I'm just saying, for anyone listening that wants to understand how these decisions get made, start interpreting like, why did they introduce a battle royale mode? You could say, oh, it's because all the games have it and Fortnite has it. It's
yeah,
like, well, but as a product,
not creative and
exactly,
they just fast
they just did it. It's like, no, it's like we haven't even touched on prioritization, which is a huge part of product. But you have to prioritize a game mode to release and which is the best one in that moment of time. And with Arc Raiders coming out, single life mechanic where if you die, you lose everything and you're out of the game mode. Battlefield probably looked at the competition that we should rush Battle Royale out the game mode sooner. And just for anyone, just try to look at these decisions not as something like just in a vacuum, but these are part of kind of loads of considerations and just predictions of how things can go. And then it's backed up by metrics, it's backed up by player research, by testing, by gut feeling. It's a whole concoction of decisions that have to come together.
Yeah, you don't think they have like, I worked at EA, they have armies of central teams, data science teams, and then the studio itself has armies of business people and people looking at metrics. And like I kind of hinted at before, there's probably data to back up 5 different decisions. Like it's not like it's clear cut a lot of times, like especially in these like very gray areas, like where Battlefield finds itself. It's not like clear cut, like, oh, they should do this. It's like they could do a number of things. And I'm sure all of them can look good in a model and all of them can look bad in a model. And then to go back to like people being like, well, they're not being creative, they're just doing this. Again, it's like, okay, they could come up with something wildly novel and new and super creative. And then that could burn out 10 times faster than trying all these other things. And then you're back to, again, like everyone losing their job in a downturn economy and they have public shareholders or they're getting bought out by this investment group for $55 billion. How does that impact that buyout if they were to swing big and like really crash Battlefield? How does that impact? There's a million things to think about. And when you're like a game designer on a mid-level game, only worrying about making your one mission really good and having the design director be like, oh, this is awesome. This is awesome gameplay. It's like the stressors you have to worry about are so immediate to your immediate content. And then when you make it again back up to where you're making like 8-figure, 9-figure decisions, you're worrying about the Savvy Games, the game investment arm of the Saudi Public Investment Fund, and how they're going to reevaluate EA after they put in this bid to purchase it. But you made a decision on Battlefield and you crashed it. Maybe there's a stipulation in the contract where the threshold of like earnings go up or down, they're allowed to actually change their acquisition amount or something. And then like the spiral that could happen from like one bad decision on this like massive scale where $55 billion are getting put into this company. And like, you just start thinking about stuff like that. And it's,
There's no industry like it, honestly. Games
yeah, yeah.
it's almost, yeah, it's like you said, it's very similar to movies. Can we touch on quickly funnels? Because I think this actually works really well with where we are now. Kind of the way I've always seen funnels, you have like ARG, pirate metrics, no, like acquisition, activation, retention, revenue, referral. Like that's kind of like the base one. But I'm curious to know kind of what your thoughts are on funnels and how to see them.
Yeah. So this goes back to art. I think you'll find a lot of director of products or whoever makes these decisions. If you have 10 director of products, you might have 10 completely different ways they look at live opsing and building funnels. So I'll give you mine. If I got brought into a new game all of a sudden, I would start with 3 funnels: an active user funnel, an engagement funnel, and a revenue funnel. And so the active user funnel would, I just hit my mic, would be like new and returning users and those sources. And then the returning users, like depending on how the game is, maybe I'd quantify them as like buyers versus non-buyers. And each level of the funnel. So if at the top you had like active users for the week, and then the next level, that level needs to add or multiply to equal to level above. And I'll go over why in a second. But so at the top, you have active users. Below that, you would have new users versus returning users. And then new users might split to um, new users from paid ads or organic new users. And then returning users might be reactivated users or retained users. Like, did someone lapse and come back as a returning user, or have they been returning sequentially every week? And you do this in a way so that if you come in and active users is down, I call it the oh shit, revenue's down 20% moment. Is you come in on Monday and you look at the dashboard and revenue's down and you're like, oh my God. Your goal is to, as fast as humanly possible, root cause analysis this. And so when you build metric funnels this way, the top line KPI of like gross revenue then has a pyramid below it. And then you'll likely be able to see an artery vein of red down that pyramid down to like very specific metric that move that cause that pyramid to be red at the top. And that metric might cause other parts of the pyramid to be green and to be like way up week over week. So if you lost all your buyers and then the only buyers that are left are your like super buyers, then average revenue per paying user might be like super up. But then uh paying users over total number of users might be like way down. And so I build active users. That looks the same generally from game to game. And then engagement, I at the top I have the base container gameplay, so like downs played in Madden, a pull of a slot lever in a social casino game. That's at the top. And then below, I break that down into different containers, again, depending on the game. So then if you see like, um, purchases are down, you might see that people are playing the game way less. And then that might point to another gameplay container being way up. And then that's how you can see how like everyone shifted from one game mode to another. And then that other game mode doesn't have as high conversions. And so you can see all this coming in. And then for like the revenue funnel, gross revenue at the top, ARPU on one side, users on the other, break down users into different buyer segments, and then break down ARPU into like average revenue per paying users, transactions per paying users. And I have examples online of all of this if people want to see. But this way, like you come in, revenue's down, drop 20% week over week. And then you immediately, I call it like see the matrix, and you just immediately root cause analysis. You're not going to get the exact answer. Like it's not going to be like, in Street Fighter, we buffed, reused Dragon Punch invincibility frames, and that set off a chain reaction, right? But you're gonna go from what happened to, oh, okay, if this giant circle is the possibilities that led to revenue being down 20%, you immediately brought it down to a speck by having these metric funnels up. And now you know where to look. And then your root cause analysis turns into hours instead of like days. And then you look like a genius too, because you're immediately firing off emails and you're like, revenue's down, here's down. I already kicked off this investigation. The designers are looking at this. The analysts are looking at this. I'm looking at this. And then we're going to have a plan ready for you at 1 p.m. And then that goes from Eric really sucks at his job. I'm the executive. Like, did I hire the wrong person? I need to yell at him to, oh crap, he's on top of it. Like, sure, I didn't want revenue to be down, but now I can't wait to see why it's down and what they have proposed to me. And like, people above you don't even have time to react. You're already ahead of time. So that's how I set up metric funnels, and why I set them up that way is they just take down the mystery and how everything's interconnected, and they make it like so much more clear. You're not going to get all the answers. Again, knowing that like average revenue per transaction is down week over week isn't going to give you all the answers to like immediately respond back. But then you're going to look at your engagement funnel, and you're going to see where a player is engaging more or less. You're going to look at like the number of players, and you're going to follow that transaction metric all the way up to gross revenue. And you're going to see the steps it hit. And then you're going to go, okay, I know this could only be one of these three things. And then we look at the changes last week. Maybe we look at what our competitors did, and like immediately, again, within like 2 hours, you already know the issue and what to do next.
And this is all in your PM field guide manual, or how can
Yes.
people?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll be putting a link for that in the description. I feel like
The PM. So
yeah.
I wrote this manual.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about the manual, because it will be in the description. I want people to go find it, because that's one of the reasons I reached out to you in the first place. I saw it on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, so I was like, I have to talk to Eric because this looks great.
So it's like I said, like product management's so different at every company, and I found myself jumping to companies, and then again, like revenue and engagement being like interchangeable at the company. And I'm like, no, we can't we can't use these words or these metrics for these other things, or else we're going to be always confused. Like the language defines us. Or I had like PM direct reports who, again, like fresh MBA grads, never been in video games, never been a product manager. They landed their dream role. They show up and they're like, what's a metric? What's an experiment? You're like, oh gosh. Okay.
Here
Like,
we go.
you're going to learn on the job, but it'd be so much easier if I just had like a giant manual that explained every metric and why we use them, and like what you should be doing and how to think about the job. And so I eventually wrote this book in 2023. And unfortunately, I found out after pitching to like 30 to 50 literary agents that the market for video game product management isn't enough for a major publishing house to dedicate a whole book onto it. Maybe
Give it
later in
time.
my
Give it
career.
time. Give it time.
Give it
It's
time,
growing.
yeah.
It's growing.
Maybe later in my career, because I'm pretty sure they just go by how many Twitter or X and Instagram followers you have. But maybe later in my career, they'll greenlight this book. So after like pitching the book for somewhere between 6 months and a year, I then went, okay, clearly not in the cards for this to be like a book that actually gets published unless I went to like a vanity publisher. So what the best thing I can do now is just change it from a book that has like a bunch of personality, inject it from me and like personal stories, to where like someone could actually back it up and I won't get sued for having stuff in there too. More of a film manual for product management in general, because I think it's just going to help everyone. If there's something that even someone at a studio across the sea could say, crap, we got this new hire. Oh yeah, that one guy wrote that one manual. I'll just like kick that to them, and then I'll fill in where that manual is right or wrong, or I'll fill in like what's different. Or maybe I'll take that manual and I'll pivot off of that, and we'll make our own manual, but we'll use that as a starting place. It didn't exist, and that's what kicked it off in the first place. So I thought, why not just convert it into like a field manual, put it out for free, promote it. There's no like sign up or anything. And then everyone who reaches out to me from like an MBA program, or they're game designers who want to become product managers, or they're product managers in like tech but want to be PMs at video games, the first step to answering a lot of these questions, I just kick them off this manual, and it has like a career management section. It covers the basic skills like metrics, building metric funnels, modeling, experiments, phases of game development, what is product management, and like the modern studio. It has like a high level, like, what do you expect to be doing at like a AAA company versus a mobile company versus indie? And it's not terribly in depth in any way. It's probably like 50 to 60 pages. So you're not going to get like academic, like step by step working with Excel, building a spreadsheet, but it's going to be enough that you can take it. And if you're missing these skills, you can find them out. Or if you're curious, like you can take it and run with it and apply it to your own game, or you can answer your own questions. Like a lot of the people reach out to me about like, what should I do in my career? And I'm always like, I ask that question myself all the time. But like, what should I do in my career? It has like, here's every level of product manager in video games. Here's their responsibilities. Here's kind of like how you get promoted to the next level based on everything I've seen at all these different studios. So it's a very broad overview with some technical sections that should actually give you like actual skills to apply to your own job. But yeah, it's I don't know, it's like maybe my gift to video games and product management is if this kicks off and legitimizes it, the role a bit better, and people can always point to this, or maybe someone takes this and writes an even more thorough version, like, then have at it. Like I just hope this helps people out there and demystifies the roles for a lot.
I think it's an incredibly noble and pertinent goal, especially nowadays with gaming. Um, Eric, usually the way I end is, and the thing is, we talked about this at the beginning in terms of advice and for people breaking in, but what's a takeaway for someone listening um, that want to follow in the footsteps of a product manager and getting into the games business? And maybe, honestly, I would say that isn't coming through an MBA, because what
Yeah.
for that person that it doesn't have that surefire pathway. It's a bit scrappier. What's your takeaway?
All right. I have three quick takeaways for those because there's like three categories I see. The first category is you're in the video game industry and you're not a product manager. So at that point, I would immediately, if your studio has a product manager, I would go to the director of product. I would talk to them and I'd be like, hey, I wouldn't say like, I want to be a product manager, hire me now. But I would say I'm really interested in product management. These are the type of problems that get me excited to solve. I want to dip my toes in it. I will continue to do my whatever I am, QA, artist, engineer. Can I do some work for you? And then you come at it as the person who wants to be a product manager as a, let's dip my toes in this. Let's see if this is the job I really like. I'd be hard pressed if anyone wasn't like, oh, free grunt work. Yes, I will mentor you and give you free grunt work. And then you can work from there to figure out if there's openings. Do you like the job? Are you good at it? Does the director of product like you? And like the goal from that point would be to either get into a hybrid situation or just set yourself up so the next time there needs to be a product manager or there's a product manager opening, it's a no-brainer. It's the most no-brainer for that studio ever. They're like, for sure, you're hired.
Can I quickly add on that point on
Yeah.
takeaway number one? Just a lot of studios and companies in general are often looking to hire internally because the person already has an understanding of the teams, has an understanding of the games, the problem that they're trying to solve, or where the game is. So I think that's a really good kind of strategy if you're already working in a games company, because again, internal hires are very appealing because you don't have that whole kind of getting into things when you would have to hire someone externally.
Yes. Yeah. And I'd argue it products much likely harder to hire for than a lot of other roles. So they would much rather have you already working there being super enthusiastic about this role and filling your role than to hire a product manager they trust to make business decisions. So that's if you're in the game industry and you're not a product manager, that's generally your pathway. If your studio doesn't have a product manager or director of product, that's when you go to the studio head and you just invent your own role. Like, again, you're not going to be able to quit your job right away. Like, I was a senior gameplay engineer and then I became a product manager. It's not like I could be like, screw gameplay and then just like leave a giant void of people making gameplay. Like, it's a transition, right? But yeah, like if there is no product manager, go download this manual, go look online, find other product manager, listen to all of these podcasts, and go like propose something. Be like, I see a hole in our studio because we don't have product managers and we're not doing this. I'm going to continue doing my job, but let's talk about me doing these things and this will help us in this way. And so that's, you're in the game industry. All right. You're not in the game industry, but you're a product manager in something else. Hopefully B2C tech, that business to consumer tech. It doesn't matter though, because like if really the product manager role should translate pretty well from non video game product managers making data driven decisions, being responsible for outcomes. Your job is to convince a game studio that you know games. And this is so these get increasingly harder. Okay, so the easiest is you're already in the game industry, you got the golden check mark, you're in. You're not in games. Now, this is where I say you might be like 2 roles away from your dream role. So you want to be a product manager at Rockstar or something like Insert Studio. You're a product manager now at Expedia. I don't know. They're in Seattle. I'm in Seattle. Also, go Seahawks. It's the Super Bowl today. We got it. So you're a product manager at Expedia. Gonna be a jump, right? Now, if you want to make that first jump without an intermediary step, mobile is where you want to go. So mobile game studios need product managers. They probably have the most product managers. It's probably like 5-1. If you added every product manager in the video game industry, the mobile outranks console and PC and all other types 5-1, right?
Yeah.
So mobile is your best bet. And then the 2 areas you'd focus on are big companies like Zynga, who have a lot of like needs and quick needs to fill in product management, and then very small studios who maybe are hiring their first product manager or something. And so it's very fuzzy on how you do this, but I will say your goal is to demonstrate legitimacy and mastery of the game industry, or at least interest. And this is where I wouldn't go make a game because, you're a product manager at Expedia. You're not like suddenly rigging and animating and doing shaders. So I would do one of 2 avenues. I would do this is what the game industry could learn from the travel industry or chemical industry, whatever industry you're in. Start that blog series and try to get it published on gamedeveloper.com, gamesindustry.biz. Submit it to GDC, find like maybe like less competitive industry conferences and figure out how to get credentials through these other entities like game publications, conferences, and other things by doing something that the game industry can learn from your industry as a crossover share. And then once you have that, you can continue to talk about game industry product management in whatever capacity you can until you like have a portfolio. That's your portfolio to then submit and let game companies know, like, I already understand the industry. You're not hiring an Expedia, person who dabbles in Elden Ring on the side. Like, I completely understand the industry and what I'm getting myself into. The other side is the 2-job approach, and that's where you go find an intermediary role that then could launch you easily into the game industry. The easiest one is to go work at like a very prestigious product management role. So go like try to jump to Amazon or Google or Meta, and then you might love the paycheck and you might be like, well, what am I going to do?
I'm going to stay.
I'm going to stay. Why would I work 60 hours a week for nothing? But you want to like if you're not at a B2C company, so Expedia is a B2C company. If you're not at Expedia, let's say you're like at VMware or some hardcore and you're responsible for like servers or something, you need to hop to something that then makes sense to hop to games. So that would be the other option, is I would hop to something that would be attractive to games, like a two-sided marketplace, and then that person could hop to Roblox very easily because Roblox is a two-sided marketplace and stuff like that. So that's generally your strategy, is you either get game credentialed by really figuring out an avenue to contribute to game thinking, game business strategy, game product thinking, and then get that in front of people through conferences, publications, any other avenue, talking on podcasts like this, some avenue, right? Or doing the two hop, where you're not at the job now that's really going to make sense. You work at DuPont for some reason, like a chemical company. Not going to be the easiest jump to AAA game development. You're probably going to have an intermediary step.
Yeah.
Okay, the last one very quickly. You're not a product manager and you're not in the video game industry. This is the most difficult. This is where you're also on the two-prong approach, where you need to hop to a product manager job and then hop to the game industry, or you need to go the credential route where then you become an expert at a specific thing in the game industry. I've seen people do really well with like currencies and economy and marketplaces in games, where they're like, here's how the economy is set up in this complicated way. And I actually outlined it perfectly, and I have like nuanced research takes on this. The third option, so it's just like I'm a PM outside the game industry, but it's way more difficult. The third option for you is to join a company or project where you then can become the de facto product manager, but it's going to be a very small indie game or something like that. And this is where you're basically sacrificing your time and taking chances on like projects or companies, or you start your own project that's a very simple game where you can show you did live ops, you implemented metric funnels, and create a blog of like that. But you're going to need to like really demonstrate mastery and enthusiasm over a long-term period. And then again, mobile companies and probably smaller mobile companies or entry-level roles at super large mobile companies that have armies of product managers, like a Zynga or maybe Supercell. I don't know what their sizes are now, but and then they can like take a chance on you. Or the two-prong approach where you're two jobs away from this job, or really mastering. It'd be very difficult, but I've seen it happen where like really mastering an aspect or niche of video game product management, and then getting credentials by being published on like publications, or speaking at conferences on a very specific niche subject of product management. So those are the three avenues. None are easy. Even when you're a product manager in games, it's not easy. As I said at the beginning of the talk, this is one of the few times in my entire career where I've dipped out of the video game industry, and I'm in the digital manga industry in Japan right now. So, your product management career and your video game career is a journey. And so who knows, like all those paths I laid out, you might end up somewhere even cooler, or you might end up, leapfrogging something. You might end up starting your own game company. There's so many ways this could go, and just be open and curious and excited about it. And I can assure you, as someone who's had their dream job 3 times and then clearly no longer at any of those companies, like your dream job, it might
Comes
not
and
be what you
goes.
think it is, or it might not be your dream job 5 years from now. So like, don't get too hung up. As someone who's been there a bunch, don't get too hung up on not working at this specific company in this specific role.
It comes and goes. Eric, you're a living testament of going with the flow, following your passion. Your product expertise and just your ability to speak about it is incredible. And it's been a true gift to have you on the podcast. I'm sure the audience will feel the same way. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
And I
I
had a great
appreciate it.
time talking with you.
I did too.